My name is Samantha Bresnahan, and my speech is called The Other Teenager. The athlete, the beauty queen, the goody two-shoes, the genius. All of you recognize those people, and I bet you could even name off who these people are in your life. But what about the observer, or the empathizer? What about the people person? You might have to think about that a little bit more. Today I want to talk to you about the other teenager, and the reason why I've called this speech that is because these teenagers I'm going to talk to you about today aren't recognized by our society. They haven't been given a name, so this is the name I decided to give them for my purposes today. The three questions I'm going to answer throughout my speech are: what problems have these teenagers had in the past? What we need to do to help these teenagers in the future, and what we need to accomplish this. But before I do that, I want to give you a definition of what exactly the other teenager is. Unfortunately, it's really hard to define something that society doesn't recognize, so the definition is fairly elusive, but here's the working one I've come up with. The other teenager is someone who has a talent or a gift, but it's not the type of thing that society recognizes or applauds. It's something special that makes them unique. It doesn't necessarily make them stand out, but it's still there. On the outside, they are conforming, but on the inside, they're set apart by this talent or gift that makes them special. I want to give you some examples that might help you understand this definition a little bit better. Keep in mind that these are just examples, and they don't represent everyone. My first one is the observer, or they might be more known as like the extreme observer. And this is someone who can meet a person and then carry on a regular conversation with them, just like normal, but during this time they observe this person's characteristics, their movements, their gestures, to the point where they can predict their next move. Another example would be the empathizer. And this is someone who can hear about a situation, never having experiencing it themselves, and make a personal connection to their own life to the point where they can give advice on the situation that they've never experienced. I think a good example of this is my best friend who is here supporting me tonight. I think another good example is the people person. And this is someone who is incredibly good with people. They are good at spotting the loner and making them feel comfortable. And they're also good at making friends. You can also include in this category the smart person, someone who can sit down in a classroom and be taught something once and completely understand it. Or also someone who can read something once and have it completely memorized. Also, I would say that like the more mature person could be put in this category. This is someone who understands responsibility and why it's there and why they need to do it, and they recognize its value. But these two are more likely to be recognized by society, but I still think they stand for good examples. Keep in mind that these teenagers that have these talents aren't superior to anybody else. In fact, there's a lot of teenagers who have these gifts. You might know them in your own life if you really think about it. And these kids turn into adults who make our world go around. I want to give you an example of an adult that's like this. How many of you guys know Taylor Swift or have heard the name Taylor Swift before? Most people? Okay. Now, if I told you the name Liz Rose, how many of you guys would know who that is? Okay. Liz Rose is Taylor Swift's co-writer. She's helped Taylor write most of her hit singles, such as Tim McGraw or You Belong With Me, some of the ones that have helped Taylor Swift shoot up to the top. But none of us have ever really heard of Liz Rose, and no one really knows who she is. But without Liz Rose, we would have never heard of Taylor Swift. And these are what these kids end up growing up to be like. They're the kids that help our world go around, but no one applauds them and no one recognizes them for it. So hopefully now you better understand the definition of what exactly this other teenager is. So I want to tell you some of the problems these teenagers have faced in the past. I think one of the problems they faced is the pressure to conform, and that comes from society in general and the media coming up with what exactly we're supposed to be like, this glamorous person, this genius, just anything, and everyone feels this pressure to conform to what they're told they're supposed to be. I think another one of the problems these teenagers have faced is the lack of support from their peers, because everyone's so worried about conforming to what society has told us to. No one gets support if they're different from that. And that goes into my third problem that these teenagers face, and I think that's what has been set up as the stereotypical teenager, the teenager who, is on Facebook all the time and texts and goes shopping all the time. And that's great, there's a lot of teenagers like that, but then there's some that aren't. And they see that that's what everyone talks about, and they feel like they have to be that way. And then another problem I think they face is parents that focus on the wrong things, that might force their kids to play sports when that's not what their kid is good at, or maybe pushes them too hard in academics when that's not really their talent. But I believe that the biggest problem that these teenagers face is themselves, and that the biggest thing that will always stand in their way is their lack of self-confidence. So what do we need to do to help these teenagers in the future? Number one, I think we need to recognize their value to society. Like I said earlier, these teenagers will grow up into people who help make our world go around, who play very important parts in our society, and we need to recognize their value if we're going to help them. We also need to identify them and seek them out. They're never going to grow up if they don't know who they are, and they may need help because they may not know it themselves if no one's told them. And then after we've identified them, we need to help them and continue to grow. If that means not pushing them in areas where they're not talented and where they really don't need to be talented in, or helping them get into situations where they can observe if they're really good at observing, or understand new situations or anything. But most importantly, I think these kids need to realize that even though they may not be the beauty queen or the athlete or the genius, that they have been given unique gifts by God, and that they are special because of that, and they need to be able to realize their value. So what do we need to help these teenagers grow in these ways? Again, I think the majority of the responsibility relies on the teenagers and them recognizing who they are, and then taking the steps they need to take to get help in growing and not to conform. I also think that we need parents who will encourage their kids outside of the traditional settings of sports and education. These things are things that parents need to obviously encourage their kids to do, but outside of that, they need to also help them and encourage them to grow in ways that don't have to do with that. We need teachers who will come alongside and support the parents and help to seek these kids out and help them realize it's okay that, not to conform to what society tells them they need to. And as students, we really need to be more accepting. When it comes down to it, society will always set up its stereotypical and what we're supposed to conform to. But if we don't conform to it, then it's pointless. And people won't feel like there's something they have to try to fit into. If we don't put people down, then people will feel like they can grow. And it's up to us to not conform. So in conclusion, if you are someone whose gift society recognizes as great, if you are the athlete or the beauty queen or you're the genius, that's great. It really is. But you've been given a great responsibility to not put people who are different than you down, or to not force people to conform and be like you. The Greek philosopher Plato once said, "Know thyself." So, if you are a teenager out there who struggles with who you aren't, or what you aren't gifted at, how you may not be beautiful or the athlete or the genius, I challenge you to know who you are and to find what gift God has given you, because He's given them to all of us. And then once you've found that, never conform, because if you can do that, you might help change the world someday. Thank you.